All right, for this video, we're just going to go over custom messaging for the Unity Netcode for Game Objects multiplayer solution. So this is not how to use Netcode. This is just this one very specific thing. So if you've kind of already used it, you just want to learn how to set up the custom messaging. That's what we're going to go over. So the benefits of custom messaging, it's a little bit lower than the RPC system. Basically, you're able to set up a channel. You just give that channel a name and then a function that happens. And you can also set like the delivery reliability, and you get to decide who you send it to. So it's very bare bones, but you kind of get to make your own messaging system, which is nice. It also doesn't inherit from network behavior, which means you can put it right on the script with the transport and the network manager. So standard netcode for game object stuff here. We've got our network manager set up, and we've got our transport. I'm just using Unity transport here, just on a local host. So this is the project here. We're just going to log in. One is a server, one is a client. We're going to send a message to clients, and we're going to send a message to the server. So we're going to go both ways. Okay, so let's hop into the code. There's just some basic UI here. I've kind of done a very minimal setup. So these buttons here will just start the server or start the client. That's pretty much all they do, and they also register messages. These attack and position is just going to send that function. It's basically just going to call it. So you'll see that in the code. Okay, so this is what it looks like. These are the dependencies I've got for the script. So the first thing I did is just the ulong list. So this is all the people that are connected to the server. Now you're probably going to handle this in your own way, but basically you can send a name message to whatever connected clients. Now do keep in mind this is still server authoritative, so the client can send to the server, and the server can send to as many clients as they want, but the clients cannot send to other clients. So this list here is going to be very server specific. So what I'm doing with that is whenever someone connects, if you are the server, it's just going to register them. So basically all this function here does is it's just going to add a connection ID to this list. So someone connects to the server, their connection ID gets added here, and we're going to see that later when I send to everyone who's connected, just as an example. So the first thing you have to do for the custom messages is this. You have to basically register every function with this line of code. So we're accessing the network manager singleton custom messaging manager and just registered name message handler. So what we're giving it here is the name of the function and then the actual function itself. Now really this is just a channel name. So technically you could call it, they can be different, right? You could call the channel that, and this is the function that gets called. I like to just make them the same just so I kind of remember what's what. So you can register as many messages as you want, as far as I know. Just keep copying, pasting, and then just change out that channel name and what it does. So here we have one for the position, one for the attack. So these would be different channels of data. Okay, and then you can unregister them on destroy, just kind of good practice. Just unregister name message handler, and then just give it the name of the function, or sorry, the name of the channel. Okay, so this thing here, this has to be called after the server is started. So that's important. You can't register messages until the server's been started. So basically, however you do it, you have to click, here, I'll just run the project real quick. You have to actually have the host started, right? So you have to do this. Okay, now that it's started, now you can register your messages. So however you do that, just make sure it's done in that order. All right, so now we're going to get into the actual sending. So you have a send function and a receive function. So this is the send function here for the position. So how we're going to do it is first we start out with the data type. Now in this case, I'm starting with a vector3. We're going to do kind of more complex objects in a second. I just want to show you something that's easy to serialize that just this one will get automatically serialized. So it just kind of works with everything. So the first thing you have to do is you have to create a custom messaging manager. So just quick reference there. And then we're going to create a writer. So a new fast buffer writer. Now what this thing needs is it needs the size of the buffer. So technically you could write something like 1024, right? So this is the size of the buffer. But the problem with that is you don't always know how big your data is. So a really nice, easy way is just to use this get right size. So you just get the right size of your data. So basically when this is serialized into bytes, how long is it going to be? So that way we always know how big the buffer has to be. So there we're just determining the size, and we're using that function to get the precise size all the time. Then just write allocator.temp. Not actually sure what that does, but I've never had problems with that. Okay, so then we use this using writer. What I believe this does is it just makes it so that it disposes of the writer like right away once it's done using it. So it's just kind of the writer is being used in this context. So just write that. So here inside, we're going to use the writer, and we're actually going to write some data to that writer. So it's a bit you're doing a lot of stuff here. You kind of have to pack all this. It's a little bit more lower level than an RPC, so a few extra steps. So here what we're doing is we're packing our data, so this send position, into the writer. So that's all it is. So we know this is going to work because when we set up the writer, we made sure that it was the size of this data, right? So we made sure it was the right size, and then we're writing to it. It's all going to fit nice and tight. Okay, whoops, I had steps from there. I was doing that earlier. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are actually going to send the message. So this is kind of the actual send function for the custom named messages. So this stuff might look a little bit different how you set it up, but this is kind of the end goal here. Is we want to call this this network manager, so this one up here, custom messaging manager, and then we want to send a name message, and here you just type in a string of whatever the message is called. So remember before I said it doesn't necessarily have to be the same. So let's say I just wanted to name it update. I'd have to go up here and make sure this is update, right? So if I call this channel, the update channel, it's going to call this function. But again, I'm just going to use the same name. So it's a little bit, so it makes sense. Just something to keep in mind, right? If you type in the string here, it's not necessarily calling the function with that name. It's calling the channel that is then hooked up to that function. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so the second thing it's going to want is who are you sending this to? So if you want to send to the server, so client to server, this is what you have to type. So you do network manager dot server client ID. So this is like the clients, kind of how they're registered with the server. If you write this in, the message is going to the server. It's not going to go to like some other client or something. The naming is a bit weird, but that basically means go to the server. Then we need the payload. So this is the actual data. Again, we kind of wrapped it all up here into this writer, and we're just sending the writer over. And lastly, you don't have to type this. It'll default to reliable, I believe. But if you want to specify, you can say how you want this to be, how reliable you want it to be. So reliable will always be delivered to the target. Unreliable, it might not make it. And the reason you do this, something like a position, if it doesn't make it, you don't want to try sending it again because that data is now out of date. So you got to kind of pick and choose which channels are going to use which reliabilities. And also keep in mind, reliable will only work for, I think it's up to like a megabyte or something. After that, it's too big, so you have to start using fragmented. Right, so for larger data, if you're sending like an entire map, a serialized map over or something, you're probably going to want to use fragmented. But reliable is just fine for smaller things like this, like a position, one position is going to go through just fine. Okay, so that's what we're doing here. We are sending that message, and that is going to call this, but it's going to call it on the person we're sending it to, which in this case is the server. So it's kind of like an RPC in that way, that this is going to be called on the server side when the client calls this. Okay, so any function that's being received has to have these two parameters. So if I was to get rid of one of these, let's say I get rid of the sender ID, and I go up here, you'll see that this is now underlined. So basically, you can't register a message unless it has those two parameters. So that's the template you got to follow. So the first one is who is this message from, the ulong connection ID. And the second is just the payload. So that's as a fast buffer reader. So how you're going to kind of unpack that data is first you take the data type that you sent. So you got to kind of make sure you're using the right one, right? So I'm sending a vector3, so I want to receive a vector3 here. I'm going to read the value. So what I'm actually reading here is this buffer reader. So I'm going to read there, and I'm going to put that into the vector3. So I'm going to get that value out. And once that's done, I can actually access that, and it's going to be the correct data, right? So here I'm just setting the display to the received data, so just the vector3. So it's a lot easier to get the message out than it is to send it. You have to do a lot of packing when you send, but receiving is just reading the value. And again, you can do error checks and null checks and all that here. I'm just doing this as simple as possible just to kind of see how it works. So that's kind of the most simplest form of the messaging handler. But let's kind of do a little bit more complex than just a vector3. So let's say you want to send your own custom data type through this kind of channel. This is just one way that you can do it. I personally like to try and avoid Unity's, I think it's iNetwork serializable or something. I just find it's a bit janky. So I usually just use, down here, I've got two helpers. I copied this off Stack Overflow a long time ago. Basically, it converts things to bytes and then out of bytes. So it's a nice, simple little function. Not my own code or anything. So that'll take any struct that you have and just convert it into a raw byte array, which is nice and simple for networking. Yeah. So if we go up here, let's say we want to send an attack. So we have an actual struct. It's going to have it's going to have damage, so an integer, a string. You could add a whole bunch of other parameters here, whatever data types. But we want to basically serialize and send this whole struct over in one shot. So make sure you have the system.serializable or it will not work. And then we're going to do the same concept. So really we've got a send function, we've got a receive function, and we're just going to go through that same process. So here I'm creating my class. So just an attack damage, just kind of initializing it, setting some parameters. So Timmy is going to do, or I guess receives 10 damage. So what we're going to do here is we're going to serialize it. So I'm creating a byte array. That's actually what's going to be written to the writer. And I'm turning that struct up here. So I'm turning this thing into an array of bytes. Okay. Next, what I'm doing is, again, we're just declaring a custom messaging manager. And then we're also declaring a writer. Same idea, right? We're going to say, what is the size of our data? Make sure you grab the bytes. We're not sending that the struct over. We're sending it as bytes, right? So this one, the get right size will work with bytes. It only works with a few things, I think. So you want to make sure it's something that can go through. So we're sending that serialized byte array, and then allocator temp again. Right, using writer, write value safe, same as before. Once it's been serialized into bytes, we can just write that there. And then send a message. This time we have a different message because we're sending it through a different channel. This is something different, right? Now we're sending an attack, not a position. So it's going to receive different information. And here we're going to send, this is an example of sending it to clients. So basically you can put any list of ulongs and it's going to send it to just those people. So I could do like new list of ulong. And oh, I'm not going to know the syntax for this. Right, so you can put in whatever ulong. So let's say you wanted like 2, 3, and 1 or something. Right, you could just send it to those specific people. And that's who this message is going to go to. In this case, though, I want to send it to everyone. So how I did it is I have this list. Anytime someone connects, I'm going to send it to them. So I'm just going to send it to that, which is way up at the top here, right? It's just a list of ulongs. Okay, so you can send it, where are we there? So this is as the server. So the server can send to everyone, it can send to a few people, and it can send to one. If you just write a single ulong in there, like let's say 10, it'll just go to whoever's connection ID that is. So you can send it to one or multiple people. Okay, and then we've got the writer, same as before, right? And we've got the delivery mechanism. Again, I just chose reliable because that's a pretty small class that's not going to take up much space. Okay, receive that attack. Right, we have our same template here, who it's coming from, the fast buffer reader. This time we're going to receive a byte array because we sent this one, right? We didn't send the struct in its normal form. We didn't send this. We sent the struct as a byte array. So we're going to receive byte array. And when we're receiving it kind of on the custom messaging side, it just sees it as bytes, right? It doesn't understand what it's going to convert into. So here we're just saying out receive data and just take that and put it in this byte array. Now that we've got that byte array, now we know, hey, this is actually an attack damage class. So we can now deserialize that into something that's more an object that we can use, right? So we deserialize the byte array, and then we just use it here. So I just put a little message. I think that's actually received damage, but it doesn't matter, right? Once you have the class, you can kind of start using the values in it. So that's a way that you can use this to send pretty much any type of data over that you want. Keep in mind, you can only really send one thing, right? You can't have like multiple readers here, right? You can't do that. So how you want to do it is you want to just have one, and then your class can Your class can be a bit nested or however you want to do that. Maybe more channels, maybe you nest the data a bit more. Again, that's up to you. This is just kind of how you use this transport layer. Okay, so that is pretty much it. There's really not that much to it. I'll just go over the helpers real quick, just so you kind of see what the program looks like, then we'll test it out. So I've just got the buttons here. This is just kind of to display some UI information. Again, that server register connection, that happens up at the top. So whenever a client connects, it's just going to add them to the list, which you can see is what that's doing, right? Just add the ulong to the list. And then start network manager. So here I just have some UI stuff, but notice how we're doing that start server or start client based on which button you press, changing some UI stuff. But then we have the register messages afterwards. So that's key. You want to start your server, start your client, either or, right? You can't do both. And then you want to register the messages afterwards, which is this one up here, which is where we take the string and then we get the function afterwards. So we're basically just, we're just naming a function basically. Okay, yeah, that's that. And then again, this is just serialization functions. This is pretty standard, nothing having to do with this, nothing specific to Unity Netcode. All right, so let's just try the project out just to kind of prove that that does indeed work. So I'm just on a local host here, but this would work over the internet as well if you just gave a public IP. Right, so one of them is going to be selected as the server. It says server running. So if you look at the network manager, it now has stop server. So this one's running, acting as a server. And this one, I'm going to click client. So I'm going to send, let's send, I guess I'll send my position. So I'm a client, so I can send my position to the server, and this will pop up over here. Right, so the server gets my position. And I can go the other way, and I can send an attack from the server to the client. So notice how this says messages. I think it's going to pop away for a second, but so I click the attack button and it says Timmy does 10 damage, right? So that went from the server to any clients that are connected or any IDs that you specify. So that's really the thing to keep in mind, is that the server can send to anyone, the client can only send to the server. So there's not as many checks with this one, so you got to kind of make sure you know who you're sending to. So just to reiterate, this is going to go, if you specify this connection ID from a client, it's going to go to the server. And from the server's perspective, you just switch this with ulongs. So in this case, you can just send, however you're managing that, right? You're probably going to have your own room system where people are split up by ID. So you can decide who you want to send this message to, what room, what group of people, maybe everyone in a party, maybe just one person. And that is that. So this is the custom messaging, custom messages, just a slightly different way than doing it other than RPCs. Again, I like this one. It doesn't inherit from network behavior, so it's just, it's a little nicer in some regards, but a bit more low level. Thanks for watching.